and good afternoon, Australia. Today we have something special planned on this anniversary of the start of the Cold War. Contrary to popular belief, the Cold War started during, not after, World War II. With the heightened military and political tensions between the Soviets and the Americans, the world was brought to the brink of yet another world war. You know of the proxy wars, of the fights in Vietnam and Korea. Though it is called a war, there was never actually large-scale conflict between Russia and the US. But proxy wars were fought, wherein the two sides were funded by either capitalism or communism, in order to stop the spread of the other. Today we look at a less told story, the deadly world of Cold War espionage. Remnants of Cold War espionage still exist to this very day. You've seen movies such as James Bond, with high-tech gadgets and overblown plots. But espionage during the Cold War was much more gritty and much more real. Today, we will explore Soviet and American espionage, ranging from the famous atomic spy, Klaus Fuchs, to the CIA unintentionally creating today's Afghanistan's terrorist cells. We'll now arrive at our first subject, the Verona Project.
Intelligence played one of the most important parts in espionage during the Cold War. The Verona Project was a joint American, British, and Canadian attempt at deciphering Soviet messages to catch the many double agents.
The Verona Project was initially established to investigate Soviet diplomacy during World War II, but by the same time we had managed to unscramble the Soviet cipher. The war was over.
The project seemed all but useless now that the war was over, yet deciphered messages pointed to a new threat.
Discovered that America had been infiltrated by Soviet spies at every level. It was at this point we realised how important counterintelligence such as the Verona Project was. We already had competition with the Soviets in the arms race and the space race. We were damn sure not going to let them beat us this time.
By 1948, the Verona Project had uncovered the existence of over 300 Soviet spies that were stationed throughout the American government, yet nearly 200 were hidden by cover names.
We had no idea how much these spies knew of our intelligence. There were many we never uncovered, and these were people working in the CIA, the Navy, even some who had personally met with Churchill and Roosevelt at the Trident Conference.
Our most prominent findings came from the discovery of key Soviet agents such as Klaus Fuchs, Julian, and Ethel Rosenberg, who had passed nuclear secrets to the Soviets. Moreover, we discovered spies such as Guy Burgess, who had betrayed military and diplomatic secrets such as the plan to invest money in Western Europe.
The discoveries made by the Verona Project marked a vital step forward for American intelligence in an attempt to fully understand the secrets of the Soviet Union. The mysterious lives of spies provided a great allure for popular culture, and while some enjoyed extravagant lifestyles, the reality for most was much bleaker. This is an atomic bomb, the weapon of mass destruction that ended World War II, and the bane of the Soviet Union.
So, say you're Joseph Stalin at the end of World War II. You just received news of this destructive weapon created by the Americans, capable of destroying whole cities and taking millions of lives. The Soviets would be fools not to be afraid, so they tasked spies to find these blueprints for the weapons, to fight fire with fire. And so the Cold War reaches new heights as tension increased exponentially.
A new era of history had begun, one fueled by the threat of imminent destruction. This is the Cambridge spy ring, otherwise known as the Cambridge 5, consisting of members Kim Philby, Anthony Blunt, Donald McLean, Guy Burgess, and John Cairncross. They were high-ranking members of British intelligence and Soviet undercover spies, recruited in Cambridge University after being exposed to Soviet communism. They were dormant in British intelligence until the time was right. John Cairncross was the most important of the Cambridge 5, being responsible for stealing parts of the Manhattan Project and passing them on to the Soviets to fuel their own nuclear program. Cairncross was one of the two main atomic spies that we will cover today, being responsible for the reason as to why the Russians were able to achieve their own atomic bomb so early, surprising the Americans in this process. You see, Cairncross was in the inside, part of MI6's Section V, ironically the counterintelligence section, allowing him access to files and documents on the Manhattan Project. According to Russian archives, Cairncross managed to supply the Soviets with over 5,000 documents between 1941 and 1945. However, Cairncross's spy days were cut short when he was confronted by British intelligence on behalf of the Venona Project, which worked in deciphering Soviet messages. So Cairncross confessed and was fired, only finding employment as a lecturer in multiple universities. Meanwhile, on the direct inside of the Manhattan Project was Klaus Fuchs, a German theoretical physicist that was responsible for the success of both the Manhattan Project and the Soviet atomic bombs. Working out of Los Alamos as part of atomic bomb research and development, he was essential for many theoretical equations for the first nuclear weapons. However, he was also a Soviet spy, providing information on the Manhattan Project to the Soviet Union. He even continued to pass on information until the late 1940s, when he was caught due to the Venona Project, just as Cairncross was.
But the Soviets were not alone in partaking in gruesome operations for the sake of intelligence. Operation Tamarisk was a covert mission to retrieve intelligence from the Soviets.
Well, you see, we had been tasked with receiving information at any cost, and when we realized that we could get secret documents easily, we pounced on the opportunity.
The trade embargoes on the Soviet Union had resulted in a mass shortage of toilet paper, and as a result, many documents, some vital for intelligence, were used as substitutes.
We discovered many things from the documents, like weapon blueprints. Of course, it meant searching through sewage, and the conditions were quite appalling.
With the documents stolen from waste disposals, intelligence services from America, France, and the UK were able to piece together vital tank and missile plans. But not all missions had the same success as Operation Tamarisk. While successful at the time, the involvement of the CIA in Afghanistan between 1979 and 89 had dire consequences for the future of the region.
The invasion of Afghanistan by the Soviet Union was something that we saw as immensely dangerous. Yet unlike in Korea, the government in place had actually asked for Soviet troops. The communist government was torturing its citizens, and we had to retaliate.
Rather than risking open war, the CIA began the covert Operation Cyclone. During this operation, the CIA would secretly arm and train militant groups such as the Mujahideen to resist the Soviet advance.
At the time we understood that these groups were our allies, looking back it's clear that the only aim was to defeat communism. There was no contingency plan.
When the war ended in 1989, the large amounts of militants left in the country soon formed terrorist cells and organizations such as the Taliban.
By the 1980s, the Cold War had begun its de-escalation, as the Soviet powers were crippled under internal revolt and increased military setbacks. The need for increased espionage fell, resulting in the dissolution of the KGB in 1991, as the Soviet Union fractured. A more world-inclusive government from Russia meant that American intelligence was required less as well. Soon, the great spies of the 20th century were buried, hidden with their secrets.